Welcome to episode 32 of the Landlady Boss podcast. I'm here with my sister and co-host Rachel. Hi Rachel, how are you doing?
Great. Hello.
And we are also here with a special guest, Sara Capra. She is from TurboTenant, and she is here going to be talking with us. I'm so excited to have her on the show. She's a principal product manager there and a landlady herself. Sara, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for taking time out. We are actually kind of spread all over the world because I am now in Nicaragua overseeing my project here. Rachel, of course, is in Bulgaria, and Sara, you're in Colorado.
I am. Yep.
So we've got kind of the whole world covered right now in all different time zones, but we're making it happen. So it should be a fun time. Sara, can you tell us a little bit of the mix of properties that you are a landlady of?
Sure. So I have one property today, but I really dabbled in a few different areas. So I've done house hacking. I had a tenant living in my home, and that ultimately allowed me, of course, to save money. And then I moved out of the house and I did Airbnb. I've also currently am doing long-term rentals. So had a few tenants and continue to learn a lot, and happy to share what I know here today.
That's fantastic. I love that you kind of have a view of different aspects of property management because we all kind of are in different areas in it, and it's helpful to have kind of that perspective. And you also have the technology software side that we're going to be talking today. What we're going to dive into is how technology can help us as property managers leverage our business. So it should be an exciting topic and one that I am not super great in. So I'm excited to hear from you, Sara, and hear what you have to teach us about this. So you would have a better feel, I think, just how has technology transformed the whole property management business in the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's really made the process of property management more predictable, repeatable, and therefore more accessible. I think even, 10 years ago, many of the people who own properties today would not have thought they could do it or should do it. It just felt so daunting. And obviously, there are parts of it that feel like that today, especially when you're first starting out and you're not really sure kind of what your niche is going to be or sort of specialty or goals. But there's a lower barrier to entry. There's education really just in so many channels, and so many more people can just participate in building wealth in that way. So, you mentioned earlier, just it really is helping streamline tasks and saving landlords time, because whether your goal is to have one property and have that forever or build out a larger portfolio, every single one of us is trying to get more time back in our lives. And so technology is obviously one of the ways in which we can do that.
Absolutely. And I think it makes it so we're not doing everything on our own. I mean, historically, you think of a landlord or landlady, they're knocking on the door, they're trying to collect rent, trying to track down the tenants, trying to have all the paper documents or keep track of all the records. And I mean, now you can really streamline, like you're saying, and wear a lot of different hats more easily and save yourself time and headache and just have a lot more time to do other things. So that's a fantastic development with technology.
Yeah, and so many landlords that I know also have other full-time jobs. And so being able to identify technology and resources, other people in your network that can help you do that so that you can, as much as possible, set it and forget it. And obviously you can't do that with everything. To me, that is, I think, one of the biggest reasons to use technology in this industry, and ways in which you can sort of transform the way that you run your rental and improve it over time.
So, Sara, you do a mobile app, is that correct, for TurboTenant? Is that correct?
TurboTenant.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we've got both a web platform and mobile apps. We have one for our landlords and one for renters.
So I was thinking about a mobile app. The things that I most would use it for as I'm like running to show a property, it would be to be able to check the emails and contacts of your applicants, to be able to look at their background check or run that. I think I was thinking some other ones, like to be able to do receipts as you're buying things, to upload the receipts and put that back into your account. What are some things that you find that most managers really want on their mobile app?
Yeah, so a few are exactly what you mentioned when you're going through vacancy and you're trying to find a tenant that's going to be a good tenant, make sure they pay rent on time. Some of the other things that are really important are being able to just reference your lease agreement, for instance. I feel like I've done this a couple of times. There was an instance where a tenant they'd forgotten to pay one of the utility bills. I got a notification about it. And I thought, I think that's their responsibility. I think that's what we agreed to. Let me just double check my lease agreement. And so just to be able to pull it up really quickly in my mobile app was so helpful. And I was just so relieved I didn't have to wait until I got to a laptop because I really wanted to get that resolved quickly. When we're talking about residency, rent payments tend to be the focal point and the main thing that, of course, is important to me, but I talk to dozens of landlords all the time, and that tends to be one of the biggest areas, just kind of, especially when you have multiple properties and you're really trying to figure out which properties and tenants have paid and which haven't, and when you've got invoices flying around and just making sure that you can get those paid, etc.
So seeing a list of delinquent accounts, like the renters that owe money, that's one of the things on the mobile app that you can see that quickly. Yeah, that is helpful. Right. That's nice.
I would think having an app would be a huge game changer for property managers in the last couple of years, because like you're saying, I know so many times, I'm on the go and I'm like, what did the lease say about that? Oh, wait, I got to get back to my laptop. How many times have we thought that? I got to get back to my laptop to look that up. Or if you have staff that are doing tours for you or texting you questions, and it's so nice, that you can say, oh, pull up the lease and look at it right then, because there's always those little questions like, I don't remember. And there's no way that you can remember every aspect of your lease at all times. Plus you want to double check. So that's huge. And just we're always on the go. I feel like we are. My car is more my office than my home office, right? Busy landladies. So having an app is fantastic. And I have seen other platforms that don't have apps, and I just go, well, how are we supposed to keep up? So that's fantastic to have that.
Yeah, I think another big piece too is the communication aspect, whether it's maintenance, like we were talking about earlier, and just needing to communicate with contractors if they're at the property and you can't be there, or communicating with tenants. That's one of the things that I'm, when you describe like, oh, I have to get back to my laptop, that's one of the main things that I really just don't want to have to wait to do, because it's something that we can do so easily via text. And so if you have a platform that can do all of those things that are like sending a text message and just really easy, maybe has predictive text, things like that, that is, I think, one of the primary ways in which mobile apps are most helpful for landlords on the go.
That's nice.
That would be so helpful. Yeah, and obviously you're partial to TurboTenant, of course. As we mentioned, you work for TurboTenant. We are in no way getting any compensation from TurboTenant for this interview, but so you're going to be obviously presenting more TurboTenant's aspects and features, of course, but there are so many options out there, and I should be upfront and say Rachel and I do not actually use TurboTenant, so we are in no way getting any.
We're curious though.
Kickbacks. We're curious.
We'll
We're always wanting to learn. Exactly. I'm always on the lookout for a fantastic property management software. So this is great to learn more for sure. So, of course, we're looking at what are the best property management softwares out there. I would think you're probably thinking TurboTenant, and that's okay to think that. But I know there's just so many options. And as I've researched them, there's some that it looks like, they'll pay a percentage of each transaction, and some that charge a monthly fee, and some that charge per bank account. And I mean, it looks like there's just so many. I think it can be very overwhelming for people to try to dive into all the features of all the different software.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. And I do think that, I mean, obviously I do a lot of research and look at our competitors and have, used other tools in the past. And so I think being able to find, I don't know, I kind of think of it like investing in any other form. Like if you don't understand the pricing or the structure or really what the offerings are or how they're valuable to you, it's probably not the right solution for you if you've, gone through the effort of doing a little bit of research. So I think what's really most important for investors is take the time to sit down and identify what your goals are for investing. And then, if you're a seasoned investor, maybe you already have a lot of your processes in place, but look at the areas where there are opportunities for optimization. And, not just any optimization, but the things that you want to optimize for. So more time, a better tenant experience, whatever that might be. And then I think that's a really good way to mitigate that overwhelm, because then you can kind of target your research instead of just feeling like you have to go search for everything and say, like, what's the latest technology that we can use, or that I can use to, and sometimes that's helpful, right? Just to get kind of general ideas. And I think it's important to talk to other investors, landlords, but that's kind of been my approach, is like, let me just tackle this one kind of part of my process at a time. And then if there's a particular technology platform that can do multiple things, like that's really what I'm aiming for.
Right. I think most of the time, I think we are looking for a way to get rid of the 5 or 6 programs that we use and consolidate it into one. And so that, I know that was what I was looking for when I'm looking for property management software, is that I look at all of the different little apps I use, and the mileage app and the receipt app and the tenant portal online app and then the accounting app, and all of these things that I'm using, and I'm looking for a software that when I log in, I could do all of those things in one place. And each software has its own, I think, like strength. Some of them are heavier on the tenant. Some of them are heavier on the landlord side, where they have really good background on that. Others are mainly just a rent collection. And so I'd say, as they're evolving and growing, what would be TurboTenant's focus that they've been working on to make it a better experience for property managers?
Yeah, it's really exactly what you just said. So streamlining, centralizing all of the key parts of both the vacancy and residency cycles that property owners are going to go through every time they get a new tenant, and trying to automate that and make that process as quick and transparent as possible. Because obviously one of the most important things with investing is making sure that you're being compliant. And I've again mentioned I own one property, but I would have to imagine that, if you own multiple units, then that, and especially if they're in different locations, making sure you're compliant can feel even more daunting. So I think having that education as a resource as well is super important. Disclaimer, again, obviously I do work for TurboTenant, but one of the things that I really appreciate is that if you go into the platform and you do have properties in multiple states, once you select your state, we'll infuse into the lease agreement the very state-specific or county-specific laws, just disclosures about that. So either we've already incorporated it into the lease for you, or if it's, very nuanced and it's a decision that you need to make about certain specific information, we give you the resources to make sure that you can quickly do that research and incorporate that. And that's a peace of mind element that I think is also just crucial.
Oh, that's really helpful. Yeah. So did you have an attorney just go through every state? I mean, that sounds daunting right there.
Yeah, and I think that's often what people do, is they'll just look for, a reasonable but diligent attorney in the different areas they're in. And instead of having to do that, or at least giving that attorney the first draft, so you're spending far fewer hours of them reviewing it, can just save so much money.
Nice.
That could be huge. Yeah, I didn't realize TurboTenant had that feature, but that's a fantastic feature, because I think people do stress about that. How do I find my state-specific laws? How do I make sure I'm in compliance with my state leases? So that's really a nice feature. Something else that TurboTenant did, because as I mentioned on past episodes, have been looking at different platforms diligently, was you could have unlimited bank accounts attached to it. Because as I look at different platforms, that's a big one for me, because I follow the mindset of an account for every property. So you can imagine that really adds up to a lot of accounts. And some platforms, I've noticed, they charge you per bank account, or they'll give you like 3 or 4, but then after that you're paying monthly fees, or there's onboarding fees like $100 per one that Buildium has per bank account. Well, when you have 30, 40, 50 bank accounts, all of a sudden that's really expensive. So that's something I really did like about TurboTenant. You could have as many bank accounts as you needed, and just they have the accounting aspect that they do a third-party accounting now, correct? They have like a third party. So that looked, you pay a little extra for that, but it did look a lot more robust than a lot of them, because a lot of them I think are being property management softwares, but then they're like, oh, we have accounting too, but it's not necessarily really something you could just turn over to your accountant at tax time. It's more just
Okay.
like a keeping track of expenses. So that was a feature I saw that was updated. That
Mm.
was really nice.
I was just going to say that's been one of the, when we partnered with Aria Hub and then more recently acquired them, I was so grateful because I think the period or the particular part of renting my property that I dreaded the most was tax season. And I just really didn't have a good sense of everything that I could deduct and all of that nuance. And so it was really helpful just to be able to have that then as a part of the platform. And I do just want to mention just because this is a personal story that might resonate with a lot of people who own properties kind of in their earlier stages. I asked for a lease agreement that a friend had used for her property. And then this was like, several years ago, but went through and just changed the things that were relevant to my property. I didn't know if she got that lease agreement from a lawyer. I didn't know, how she developed it. I just knew she sort of like refined it over time and that generally speaking, she was an organized, diligent person. And in hindsight, this was obviously before TurboTenant, but in hindsight, I just cringe when I think about that because I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have anybody else really look at it. I just thought, this must be how you do things. And so it is nice. Whatever platform works for you and makes you feel secure and confident and kind of helps remind you how much better you're doing along the way. That's a good sign.
I think it's an evolution for sure. We're all kind of starting out at our different places. And I think anything that kind of can help you skip to the end where you have, like a legal contract, everything is kind of all your ducks in a row versus trying to just piece it together. And I think that's what technology really does for property managers. It helps you learn so much quicker. You don't have to necessarily do everything manually. And so being able to jump ahead like that, and like you're saying, step in from the get-go and have these different features, even when you're just still learning, helps prevent kind of the scenarios you're talking about, which is how it was in the past, right? We all kind of started someplace and we were just piecing together what we could and trying to make it work. So I love that technology does help you skip to the end a little faster.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
That's fantastic.
And it does allow you not to be an accountant and still be able to run your business. I think when it had to be QuickBooks, most of us were unable to do it. And so we're just kind of handing our accountant our Excel sheets of income and expenses and just saying, okay, here it is. But when you do have a real software, you can categorize everything and it makes it a lot easier when you hand it to your accountant.
Yes.
Do you find, Sarah, often that landlords or property investors, they are hesitant to adopt the new technology, or what would you say are the main reasons people kind of don't want to take on the software? Are they insecure in their tech skills?
It does, yeah. And I think it's a mix. We definitely talk to landlords who are they've had processes in place for a long time and there's a switching cost, right? And so there's real and perceived costs, but I think ultimately we kind of, as humans, think of certain things like that as binary. So if it's generally going to take time to do something and it might be hard, even if it's just temporarily, it's like, I'm going to be hesitant towards that. But I think what is helpful with that is everything is a trade-off. And so it's always about, do you want to do a little more work kind of at the beginning and ultimately save time over time, hopefully? Or do you want to keep doing things the way that you've been doing them and that's comfortable and it works and there's nothing wrong with that? And so I think it's just more about, again, evaluating those trade-offs and deciding what's most important to you. I think there is a point of diminishing return for certain aspects of rental management if you never want to adopt technology. So I think just at least being aware of the options is really helpful, and maybe at least identifying the areas that take the most time and that are most painful and trying to, find a tool for that.
I love that kind of baby steps, looking at, okay, what are your pain points and your triggers, and then trying to find ways to solve that. But I know for me, the thought of transferring over 70 plus tenants on a new platform is like would keep me up at night. Like I would break out into like a cold sweat because that is such a daunting task. And when you have everyone trained in one thing, so I know when I've been looking at different softwares, I'm like, it's got to have all the pain points, or I'm not even going to try to
Right.
transfer over. So I wonder for a lot of people if it's just that, like you're saying, that initial few weeks of headache, maybe a few months, but then in the end, if it has all those features that are really going to streamline everything for you, then it would be so worth it.
Yeah. And you just, pointed out, I think something really salient, which is sometimes you have to go all in or just stick with what you have because you can't transfer all 70 tenants and then not choose parts of the process to do in that certain platform. I mean, people do it today because, as Rachel pointed out, there's lots of different platforms, but ideally you're just really trying to centralize everything in one place. And so I think that just goes back to trying to find that all-in-one platform and having that switching cost be as low as possible because the company helps with transitioning all those tenants or their platform's just so easy that you're, like duplicating documents and messages and all of those things without really having to do much that is manual.
Sarah, I have a
That's
question
true.
for you. It's kind of the unicorn of all of the programs that I looked at, and I don't know why. So, from a programming standpoint, why would it not be something that every property management software would do in order to like facilitate the actual running of my own business? So I have a property management business. So the background would be my staff. I have payroll, insurance I need to pay. And then I mean, I can get by doing income and expenses by having my bank account as one of the accounts. And so I can categorize that way, but it's really not set up to run my background business. I mean, let's just take payroll. Is it not worth it for you to be doing that also, along with my front part, which is my tenants and my landlords? But what about the back part?
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of like the back office logistics. I
Yeah.
mean, the short answer is programmatically, you can do just about anything. So when platforms don't have that, I really think hopefully it's a strategic choice because are so many different ways to be a real estate investor. And historically with TurboTenant, for instance, we do have property managers on our platform. So landlords who might own their own properties or they might manage other landlords' properties. But historically, and I think really even mostly in our early years, we had a lot of landlords with, 1 to 3 properties. And so they didn't have that operational need really. They were just trying to learn the process so that maybe one day they could pass that knowledge on to a staff. But I think that the reality is because of what we talked about at the beginning and this being now such a low barrier to entry to invest, I think that we will see many platforms cater to that more because that is it's a common role and people are not just doing property management and they're not just doing single family investing. They're property managers, single family, multifamily, fix and flip,
Right.
all the trades. So I think we will see that, but that is my observation about why they all don't today.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe just in the past it was not as common for people to really be running it like a whole property management business. Yeah, it was more like you're saying, people have a couple properties on the side on their own, but I think it is becoming more mainstream for people to be doing all different avenues and having a team and employees, all these things. And I think it will become more of the future landlady to be doing that kind of thing. You're leading the charge, Rachel.
I don't
Really?
think so. I just think that it's something that hasn't come up yet and needs to. It should be
Yeah.
there. So, all right.
Yeah, what are some of the things that you think can be automated to really reduce the time spent on these repetitive tasks? Can you think of different features even that TurboTenant has, since you're more familiar with that really can save time for property managers?
Yeah, I think the one that comes to mind for me very first is finances, because that's always the easy one to pick on. There's just so much that goes into that, and we talked a little bit about that already with accounting. But then there's also monitoring the health, and every time you have turnover, you are sort of reevaluating the ROI and making sure you're charging the correct rent. And so for me, having all of my bank accounts integrated with REI Hub, TurboTenant, having expenses and income, like everything is just fully automated there. I feel like I barely have to lift a finger to do anything. I'm also notified of all of those inputs and outputs. And so I'm just spending a very minimal amount of time worrying about that. And that's, understandably so, tends to be the most kind of stressful point for landlords, especially again, the more you grow, because just gets harder to track. But I do think what's really important when we think about automation, especially when it comes to finances, is that those outputs and that automation is only as helpful as like the initial inputs, and really like periodic checking, right? And making sure that all of those things are still working and you've still got your expenses in there correctly. And so I think there'll always be a little bit of that kind of upfront work and manual monitoring. But I would say like 90% of that process should be automated.
So does it have where you can link with your bank and transactions are automatically uploaded and you can reconcile? Like it has that feature? Or is it more manually loaded? Mm-hmm.
So every time I put an expense, so I've got my bank account set up in TurboTenant, and then rent comes in automatically. I get notified. The tenant automatically gets a receipt for that. If I log an expense, it is, because we're integrated with REI Hub, the accounting software, it's automatically being tracked for my Schedule E. So I can pretty simply hand that over to my accountant pretty soon here.
Nice.
And it's been.
That was something I did notice with the new accounting. I don't know how new, but I think it's newer that TurboTenant's using the third-party accounting, was that all of the categories and everything that was there, it was the exact categories for the Schedule E or the tax and things that you would need to give to an accountant. So because other ones I've used, it's maybe, I don't know, simpler, or like they have their categories, but it's not necessarily the exact categories that would be for the tax professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you go and log an expense in TurboTenant today, the list we have is very specific to the Schedule E, and other landlords might still have questions about things that you can deduct and kind of the category something should fall under. I definitely have, and so I've gotten on the phone with REI Hub for, my personal kind of taxes and just said, like, I need help understanding a little bit how I should put depreciation in here, or, just kind of different things about my loan or insurance. And that's been really nice too. I think with any technology you use, you still need that personal touch, and you still need those educational resources that are a little bit more kind of personal to you and your circumstances. So that's been nice.
So they actually have a real person you can talk to. That's amazing.
Yes, I know, it's rare these days.
I know, with AI, everything, usually you don't get a hold of anyone. So that's nice. There's someone you can call and ask questions, because we're not accountants, right? We don't want to be. At least I don't. So that's nice. You can ask.
How have you managed to automate the leasing process, getting out the advertisements, being able to put in the front information, and then it gets out to sites, and then you're getting those responses back? Like, how has that been automated?
Yeah, so I go through just a listing setup process, and we actually have, like, when you get to the part that often takes the longest, the part where you have to enter the description for your property, we have an AI automation tool where you can just click and it will enter a description of my property based on the information that I've already entered. We have that for the title as well, because obviously that's a big part for, keyword searches and just tenants being able to get the information they need. So that's really helpful. And then once that listing is set up, I literally just click one button and it goes out to a variety of different listing sites, and that's it. That's been so easy.
Wow.
That's actually one of the main things that when landlords are starting to market will come to us for, because the marketing syndication is it's so easy. It's free. I love it.
Yeah, so I have something similar with Buildium without the AI. That was interesting. One thing we can't do, though, is go and find, like, I can't go to Zillow and find that advertisement and edit it. I can only edit it from my mainframe. Is that similar with you, that you can relaunch it, but you can't go and edit it on that site?
Yeah, so if it comes from syndication from the platform, you do have to edit it in that platform.
Yeah.
But that's a really neat feature that the AI will kind of fill it in. It brings me to my next question, like what role have you seen AI take in property management? So that's obviously one way, automating those descriptions, which is so annoying to come up with, trying to come up with creative words or how to make this sound really great. So that is so nice they do that now. Can you think of any other areas that AI is helping?
Yeah, so I mentioned the situation with the lease agreement where I was given one by a colleague several years ago. Now there's a tool that we have. So in addition to being able to just generate a lease agreement by choosing your state, if you have a lease agreement that you really like and has worked, and maybe you've already had a lawyer look through it like a couple years ago, and you just want to do kind of an audit, we have a lease agreement audit tool. So you could just upload that and then it will kind of give you back the information about how compliant your lease agreement is. And
Wow.
then I think one of the really like emerging trends right now with prop tech is smart home appliances or digital tools for appliances rather. And so access management, energy management. And I find that really interesting just because I think that's an area where people have been most hesitant, or one of the areas where people have been most hesitant to use it. So obviously, Google Home and Alexa are a part of that, and those have been around for a while and people have adopted those quite widely. But having a keypad that you can just program to let in a real estate agent or someone to show your home around when tenants need to get in, but you're not available or you're in a different country, just like efficiency with your water and your energy and all of that. I think, yeah, that's probably been one of the most interesting areas where I've seen AI because it's, we talk about AI a lot in all industries, but it's really starting to integrate into every aspect of vacancy and residency, which is cool to see.
That is cool.
Wow, that is
I like that.
so fascinating. I love that there's other areas besides just how to word a very, I use it to like respond to tenants if I have to have a very difficult conversation or like a text, like how
Yes.
to word, like, this is a warning, you need to stop doing such and such in a nice way. So I'm sure I'm not using AI to its full capacity, but it's really helpful in that field, like how to have the difficult conversations. Tell me what to say.
I love that, Marie, because I mean, really what every landlord should be doing is saying, with this particular task, can AI help me make this faster, more efficient, more professional, whatever it is, more compliant? And that's something that I'm really trying to ingrain in my own mind because it can just help with so many things. And communication, I think, is one of those things that feels much more concrete to everybody, both in terms of how reliable it is and how quickly you can edit it if it doesn't meet your needs. And so I think that's a really great way to use artificial intelligence. And yeah, I think communicating with tenants, that's something that's going to be on record and something that, if anyone needs to go to court at any point, like you'll be pulling that up. And so, definitely can't underestimate the importance of that.
We'll say sue ChatGPT. It
So,
wasn't me.
so Sarah, do you have email prompts for the landlords? Like, do you have templates that are different emails for different things, like a welcome, a maintenance issue, an eviction? I mean, do you have some of those offerings?
Yeah, so we really have kind of, I would say, three areas that come to mind with that. One is just automated messages for like rent payments, so reminding tenants to pay their rent or, any charges that you've set up or fill out an application or sign their lease agreement or an addendum. And then also things that, quite frankly, I wouldn't probably have thought of on my own or I would have done pretty sporadically, like check-ins. So when tenants pay rent on TurboTenant, they see a check-in prompt that just asks how it's going, if there are any maintenance issues that need to be addressed. And I love that because I actually had a situation recently where I just happened to reach out to the tenant, say happy holidays. And they said, oh, by the way, you have mail here. And there's also like these couple of things I'd really like you to look at. And one of the piece of mail was something related to taxes that I really needed. And the maintenance related issues were at a point where they're definitely manageable, but I want to get in touch with someone to take a look at them. And I'm not sure that communication would have happened without that outreach. And so that's what that automated check-in can do. I think that's really helpful. And then we have sort of like, they're automated, but manual in the sense that you can, for important documents like filling out a condition report, you can just click send reminder and we have an email ready to go that just reminds them to fill it out. And then we also do have templates that landlords can use if, every time they have turnover at the rental, it's just like, here's all the Wi-Fi information, or don't forget to set up this utility or whatever.
So when you send out listings automated to the different syndicated accounts, I guess you'd have Zillow, and I mean, you have quite a few, right? Which one seems to be getting the most response lately?
So last I looked, I would say apartments, as one, apartments.com. And then we do have a couple of Zillow affiliates, so Hot Pads.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember the name of the other one, but yeah, kind of the bigger ones that you would expect that frankly most people have heard of.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say the larger ones.
That probably changes by region. I'm guessing certain areas use certain ones more than other areas, depending on where you are in the country.
Yeah, I think so. Part of that is just kind of based on if the listing site, maybe they're based in a certain area, and so they just feel like they're better at attracting kind of people with properties from that particular area. But yeah, it sort of depends.
How do you think landlords and investors can stay ahead of all this technology that's coming? I know it can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah, I think the best way to go about staying ahead of the curve or making sure that you're at least not missing out on resources that can help are just, and I referenced this a little bit earlier, but get good at identifying the areas of your process that you want to optimize for. So time, money, whatever it is, and but do that research periodically. And that way you can see what's, new on the market. Or I think not every company even does a great job at marketing all of the new features that they are rolling out with. And so just, whatever you're using today, even checking in and making sure that you know what's available so that you're fully taking advantage of whatever you are using. And then, of course, looking for others in your network who are doing similar things to what you're doing with investing, and those that are doing it well, just try to learn from them. I think that tends to be really helpful for me, just going to networking events or posting in forums like, what about this specific situation? And you'll find that, even when you ask a question that might be totally unrelated to technology, you're just like, here's my problem, that people are like, oh, I use this and I use that. And so that can save you some time from just like the general Google search or ChatGPT search.
That's really good idea. Yeah, staying in those platforms or joining groups and learning from each other. That's so helpful. Because yeah, sometimes people say, what about this portal or this software, and it's amazing how much information you can just get by just reading people's responses. And you're like, that just saved me hours of research. Because I have found with property management software, I don't know what it is. It's hard to get all the information until you do the trial and log in and have to do all the steps. And then you're like, oh, I wish you had just said that from the get-go, that you don't have that feature or that.
Right.
So it can really take a ton of time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if listeners could implement just one piece of technology to improve their property management workflow, what would it be for you? What do you think is the most important?
So tough because there are just so many aspects of the process. I mean, I think the one piece of technology should be the thing that aggregates all of the solutions to your problems. And I realize that, we'll always be relying on something manually or need to double check things and just make sure that, whatever the first draft of something is correct. But being able, I often say the first draft of everything is the hardest. So if you can find a platform that will help you with the first draft of everything and then help you refine that. And so you are really just, like we talked about with the mobile app, like you are just checking in, making sure it looks good, and then you can move on with your life. I think being able to find that centralized platform that will manage all of those more arduous parts of the process. So you don't have to log in, have all these tabs open and log into multiple accounts. That's the best.
Good.
That's really good advice. What's your personal favorite tech tool before we close here? Do you have a favorite thing that you love to use?
I am partial to TurboTenant, but as I mentioned, I started working there because I was looking for tools to be able to just figure out how to own a property and create a good experience and make my life easier. And so I just really haven't had to use too many tools outside of that. I would say for short term, I know this is one that everyone's familiar with, but I am continuously impressed with Airbnb and the way that they simplify the experience both for guests and for hosts. So yeah, I think those are the two.
And yeah, thank you. Quick question for you about the home hacking that you did. Did you rent out a bedroom and they share your living space, or did you have like a separate little apartment in your house? How did you do that?
The former, I had a second bedroom and rented that out. So all of the other spaces were communal. So kitchen, living room, rooftop. It's a very open floor plan as well. So it was an adjustment. I will be frank about that. And again, I just sort of looked at the trade-offs and I was like, short-term sacrifice, long-term goal. They were also great. I thought I was really fortunate. I, again, did not have a lot of the knowledge and resources available, or I didn't know about them at the time to really do as much diligence as I should have. We did a FaceTime sort of interview where I gave a tour of the property and asked some questions, and that was it. I, of course, will never do that again. I screen now. I run all my lease agreements through, compliance tools, use what we have, but it was, it worked for me at the time, and it was a really good learning process before I jumped into just fully renting it out.
So that was your beginning of being a landlady, was to rent out a room. I mean, that's a great start. And then you ended up renting out the whole entire place. And then did you buy another place to live, or did you rent and then rent out your?
So I'm still in the journey. So right now I rent out that home and then I'm renting myself right now.
Yes.
And I'm saving for another property.
It's perfect. I mean, a lot of our listeners are looking for a way to do it. So it's awesome. That is amazing. Yeah.
This has been so great. So much information. I'm going to have to definitely go back to TurboTenant and take another peek at it. Sounds like they have even new features. So I'm always on the lookout for streamlining my processes. But Sara, it's been so great. Thank you so much. I love hearing your story and where you are in your journey and just all the features available as we all are trying to be better, more efficient, have more time to do the things we want and be better property managers. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been lovely speaking with you both, and I've learned a lot from you just reading about you and listening to you. So congratulations again, Marie, on your recent property purchase. And I think it was the 19 units. So it's really exciting, and you both are inspiring. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a busy year, but yes, technology has helped for sure. I couldn't have done it alone. But if you're enjoying the podcast, we obviously do this for you. We aren't bored. We have things we have to do. So we're hoping that this is beneficial for you. So if so, please leave comments, subscribe, and share it with other landladies that you think this may be useful for. We'd be happy to hear from you. If you have questions or topic ideas or comments, you can email us at landladybosses@gmail.com. And remember, no one can manage your properties as well as you.